Welcome to the Surrogates Corner with James Mahan.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Surrogates Corner. I'm James Mahan, the founder and CEO of the Surrogates Corner, where I passionately advocate for surrogates and donors, providing practical legal guidance and advice to surrogates and donors throughout their journeys. Today's episode features Joey Guzman-Kuffel, owner and founder of Counseling with Joey and Associates, and discusses psychological screening and counseling during surrogacy journeys, what to expect, and how to prepare for your journeys. Joey, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, James, good morning. Thank you guys for having me here.
Absolutely. So, Joey, this is an area that I don't get a lot of visibility on, so it's kind of new to me as well. Can you briefly describe for everyone what your role is in the surrogacy journey? Like, who are you interviewing? When does that take place? And how does that process occur?
Sure. So normally I'm going to be interviewing a gestational carrier, egg donor, sperm donor, an intended parent or recipient parent, or anyone who's wanting to donate any embryos that they have created on their own, but they're done, building their family. Mm-hmm. So I'm interviewing all sorts of different individuals who are involved in the third-party reproduction or assisted reproduction process.
Okay. And in a typical surrogacy journey, let's say maybe one who's going through an agency or even independent, when does that happen, or when do they get to you? And is it kind of like how's the match going to work? Or are you kind of focusing on each party individually at first?
Yeah. So at first it's every person individually. And when do they come to my office for the interview or the consultation? It really depends. So if we're talking about a recipient or intended parent, it's not always at the beginning of their journey. I might meet with them at the middle or even sometimes even towards the end of the journey. I prefer if I met with everyone at the beginning of the journey. That way we're providing the recipient and intended parents with information that is so vital to them making informed decisions. But Sure. It can vary, but ideally it would be best if I'm interviewing them at the beginning of their journey. Mm-hmm. Now, with the gestational carrier, sperm donor, egg donor, normally that is at the beginning because most people want them to be screened before they are allowing them to be a part of their program.
Sure. Okay. That makes sense. For like those donors and those surrogates specifically, are there certain things that you're looking for? Are there big issues that sort of routinely come up? Any red flags? You're kind of like, oh, this is going to be a problem for them acting as a surrogate or donor, or what kind of things are you on the lookout for?
Yeah, well, most importantly, I want to understand that emotionally and psychologically, that they are well off. We want to make sure that we prioritize their mental health, their psychological health, their physical health as well. So when I'm meeting with them to understand, where they're at, I'm really, doing a lot of psychological screening. We want to make sure that their emotional readiness is right there. We want to prioritize emotional readiness, psychological well-being, because that is, I think, at the forefront of everything, because surrogacy is a very emotional and psychologically demanding process. So we want to make sure that these individuals, these candidates, again, are ready emotionally and psychologically. When I'm interviewing them, I'm trying to make sure that they've considered everything from different perspectives and different aspects. Again, emotionally and psychologically, physically, their motivation for wanting to do surrogacy. We want to make sure that, again, that the motivation is a healthy one. We want to make sure that they have the right type of support so that they can receive support while they're going through the journey. And also understanding, where their family is, with this whole process. Are they on board? The spouse, their extended family, and also very importantly, their children, because their children can also be affected. So I'm looking at a lot of different aspects when we're screening, to determine whether, again, if they're appropriate to move forward with the process or not.
Yeah, no, that's great. Because a lot of times I always feel like, when the surrogates get to me, the general idea of what they're doing and why they're doing it seems pretty obvious, pretty crystal clear. They know they're getting pregnant, it's not their baby. But I always wonder, leading up to this, what's your spouse think? What do your kids think? Are they older? Are they younger? Are they going to be impacted by it or not? Because like you said, there's a lot of, it's a 9-month journey, hopefully. And there's a lot of stuff that goes into that sometimes I always wonder, does this come up, or have they thought about that? So that's great. That's great to hear that's what you're doing. One other thing that I always kind of am curious about, Joey, is that from my perspective, and again, my visibility is pretty limited on this, most of the things seem to happen prior to matching. So usually surrogates, at least, correct me if I'm wrong, get screened with the program. IPs tend to get screened with their program. When the matching happens later, do you do joint counseling sessions at all? Or is that kind of an agency by agency decision for things that maybe are now no longer idiosyncratic to the surrogate or the IPs and now about the match that you're looking for? Or how does that process work?
Your joint sessions are very important. I think they're crucial for every journey, but it does vary and it depends on
Mm-hmm.
where you're at in our country. Whether if you're in the East Coast, West Coast, and it also varies between agencies and clinics. There are some fertility clinics and some agencies that don't require a joint session.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of biased, towards wanting to have a joint session because I do believe that a joint session helps set all the expectations
Yes.
before leading on into legal and moving forward with the journey. When I meet with people, one of the things that I highlight is, you're kind of like speed dating when you're going through this process. And I have to
Mm-hmm.
say that I've been an intended parent before. I've been through two surrogacy journeys and I have two daughters through surrogacy. And so I remember what it was like when we were matching with a surrogate.
Mm-hmm.
And, you're presented with a profile and then, you're asked if you want to meet with that person. And so then go ahead and you meet with that person. And then you're like on a date for about an hour to an hour and a half. And then after that call is wrapped up,
Right.
then you're expected to make a decision whether if you want to marry this person or not, right?
Right.
You're going to go into an illegal agreement. And so again, the joint session can kind of be sort of looked at as that like premarital counseling of like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, do we understand what the expectation is? Are we in agreement with all of the things that we've talked about during our match session? Are there some things that we haven't addressed yet that should be addressed before we move forward? So it
Yes.
gives you that added, I would say like protection to be able
Mm-hmm.
to understand what the expectations are and to see if there's anything that you may disagree on that maybe we have to come back to really look at before we say, okay, let's sign the legal agreement and move forward.
Yeah. No, I mean I agree with you. I'm totally biased towards the idea of I would love for those sessions to be not mandated, but at least kind of like industry wide, sort of like just the golden standard of having that joint counseling session. Because when I get them at contract phase, I feel like a lot of times some of those big issues haven't been discussed between the parties now that are actually matched. How do they feel about termination? What testing are they okay with doing? Vaccinations, shots, procedures,
Yeah.
what kind of involvement the IPs have in the process, either at delivery or during the journey. And I always feel bad like trying to do it as an amendment or kind of an afterthought, like when we're at 3 months into the journey, instead of like getting some of those issues resolved, between the parties about what those joint expectations are prior to getting into contract, and then not trying to, backfill those issues when they come up. Do you ever see people come to you where like that? I mean, that hasn't happened where maybe they arrive at the discovery of, wow, we have a conflict now and we need to figure out what to do, or do those things get to you ever, or how does that kind of work?
Yes, I mean, I've kind of seen a little bit of everything, and so I've had cases where they come to me to put out the fires
Mm-hmm.
because there's something going on within the relationship aspect that they didn't agree on, and it's become an issue. And so when I meet with them, I discover that there was never a joint session, so they weren't given that opportunity to really talk about these things that are coming up in their journey now. So I do get cases where I have to come back in and support them navigate that process where there's an issue, and having both parties really understand again, okay, what is the main concern here and what are everybody's thoughts and feelings, trying to get them to understand again each other's side and what their perspective is, and hopefully getting to a point where they can both agree and understand and empathize with one another. So
Mm-hmm.
trying to really put out the fire and then kind of remembering like what the ultimate goal here is, that as a team, because the intended parents and the surrogate, they become a team, and so the goal at the end is to be able to have a baby. Someone wants to help someone build their family, and the other party is wanting to have a family. So we want to come back to remembering again what's at the core of everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great advice. Not only for like the agencies and the clinics, but also just for. I mean, I would assume like the IPs and the surrogates can just request like a joint counseling session once they are matched, because I mean, as you said, like I mean, granted, I love it when you're putting out the fire and I'm not trying to do it, and because once lawyers come involved and it's like, well, let's amend the contract, it starts to feel very adversarial, and we don't want that. So I always tend to try to push people like, hey, if something is coming up, go get help with agency or the counseling, to talk about this, so you guys arrive at some kind of like you said, empathy and joint understanding of what the issue is and how we can resolve it. I mean, that makes my job a lot easier when it says, okay, just write this out. This is what we've agreed upon, and not like combative going back and forth and making it feel like, oh, we have disagreements, and now we're kind of going to our corners and trying to figure out what to do about that.
Yeah. And again, this whole surrogacy process, it's a very relational experience, right? So if we're thinking about just relationships in general, communication is super important in how we communicate. And so we kind of have to come back to that, because it's the same thing with the surrogate and the intended parents. It's you're in a relationship, and so let's just communicate, and let's understand what both parties want and set those expectations so that we can have a foundation to move, forward
Right.
from.
And if a surrogate kind of starts to feel like she's getting into one of those situations where maybe things are not as she was expected or whatever else, like what do you recommend that she does? Can they go to their agency if they have one, or as an independent, and just come to you guys and say, hey, can we set up a session to discuss this because this is kind of going on, or like mechanically, how does that actually work?
Yeah, well, I think ideally, if a surrogate is in a situation where maybe she's not feeling heard, or maybe she feels like, hey, I didn't agree to this, or there's some type of concern that's coming up for her, I think best thing is to always, reach out to her agency, and address these concerns with them. If she hasn't already addressed them with the intended parents as well, I think, you know, again, just like in a relationship, you want to communicate what doesn't feel good to you. So
Mhm.
if you are able to do that with the intended parents, great. Get that conversation going and get to a point where you both can agree on the thing that maybe you're disagreeing on.
Mhm.
But if that doesn't work out, or if you feel like I can't do that piece, again, your agency is going to be a great resource to go to. And then it's always okay to request, can we have a supported conversation,
Mhm.
with the intended parents? And that's when they can call us, the mental health providers, to step in and help that conversation play
Yeah,
out.
kind of guide it and sort of facilitate it as we
Absolutely.
move forward. Yeah.
Sure.
Um, for surrogates who are looking to join a program, or maybe they met some parents through one of the platforms that's out there now and doing a match, I think that a lot of them sort of arrive at the idea of like, yeah, I like being pregnant, I found it easy, I want to help people. That part seems to seem kind of obvious. What other things do you think that a prospective surrogate should think about when it comes to actually embarking on a surrogacy journey that maybe is not immediately on their radar of things to consider or ponder?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think a surrogate candidate who wants to, help someone build their family and they enjoy pregnancy. I always think that it's just more than enjoying the pregnancy and the pregnancy aspect, because it could be very different when you're doing a surrogacy journey.
Yeah.
One thing that is going to be completely different is that you're going to be injecting yourself with hormones, and that might have a different impact and effect on you emotionally, physically, psychologically. There might be some things that you did not expect, because again, you may have had some wonderful, healthy pregnancies, but surrogacy can be completely different. And so
Mhm.
you want to think about what that's going to be like, in terms of receiving hormone injections, and what the side effects might be. You're also going to wanting to look at, again, overall, what's your emotional and psychological wellness, look like? Have you
Mhm.
considered your own mental health history?
Yeah.
Other things like support is highly important, and I share this and I highlight this, very much so in my interviews. What does your support system look like? You want to have a robust support system. It can't just be one person. And I always say it can't just also be like family, like mom, dad, or sister, because I have had cases where those were the only individuals who were considered to be the support, and then I
Mhm.
get to see the gestational carrier somewhere down the line for therapy and support, because they're struggling because their mom wasn't able, to be present for when she needed her for support, and or dad or sister, whomever. So we want to make sure that we have a robust support system. And again, considering what like your support is also from your spouse.
Mhm.
I've had some cases where the spouse, this or a significant other, wasn't truly on board, and so that can also cause some friction between them and in their relationship, and it can also impact the surrogacy journey. You just really
Mhm.
want to consider more, like outside of what you think pregnancy is. Again, support, family, mental health, physical health. You know, what are their views on having, restrictions and limitations with this pregnancy? Because
Mhm.
when they were pregnant with their own child, they could probably decide that they could do whatever they wanted to do.
Right.
But with surrogacy, you can't do that. So, how do you feel about having that level of limitation? and also that level of intrusion, because there's so many people who are asking you questions, asking your significant other questions. There's a lot of personal things that people want to know about you. So are you okay with that?
Hmm.
Because there's a lot of different other aspects that go into wanting to consider when you're wanting to consider being a gestational carrier. There's so many aspects you need to consider.
Yeah. Is there one thing I just kind of thought of, Joey, in terms of like we get into the discussion of, postpartum depression on normal pregnancies. Is there something that you found is either unique to surrogacy or different about a surrogacy journey for the surrogate who carries, or kind of what that post-delivery period feels like for them that maybe they should think about or at least consider as they're, going through all these other things that they're kind of thinking about?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. That is another thing that you want to be considering is like if you didn't experience any postpartum, mood disorders, or with your own pregnancies or your postpartum period, was a healthy one. Well, what if it's not that when you're going through surrogacy? Again, there's so many different aspects about surrogacy that you probably didn't experience with your own pregnancies. And one is, after you deliver, what is that experience going to be like for you?
Mm,
I mean, did you grow an attachment to the child during pregnancy? Did you grow an attachment to the intended parent? What would it be like when you don't have that baby anymore that you're carrying, or that maybe the relationship that you fostered with the intended parents isn't the same as
post
it was
delivery.
during the
Yeah.
pregnancy?
Mhm.
Because there is this kind of like natural thing where at the beginning we're so close, and it's such an intense process and we're so bonded, but then once the delivery happens, everyone kind of gets in their own bubble of recovering, from the for postpartum, and then there's also the part where the intended parents are in their new phase of being a parent, and so the connection might fade out a little bit.
Right.
And so, what is that going to be like for them if they don't have that constant communication and contact that they did?
Hmm.
So there's a lot of aspects again to consider. It's not just about being pregnant and helping someone, but it's all these other things that we're talking about now.
Yeah. Yeah. So for a surrogate who's coming back, either as a sibling journey or who's maybe a repeat surrogate who's done the process before, does what you're looking for or kind of your discussion with them differ, or are there other things to think about? Maybe because now they have like one experience as a surrogate, and maybe just assuming it's not necessarily going to be the same, or does what you're looking for kind of be independent of whether it's a first time surrogate or a repeat surrogate?
Yeah, so I think it's a little bit of both. I think that I still look for the same things that I do initially with the surrogate who's doing it for the first time. But one thing that I hone in on too is like, what was the overall experience going through the first journey, right? So if you're
Mhm.
coming back for a sibling journey or a repeat journey or some other type of journey, I'm wanting to understand what was that experience like for you going through the surrogacy journey. Like, how did you navigate any conflicts that may have came up, either with the intended parents or just within her own relationship with her spouse, or or any type of effects that she had from the hormones. Like, I want to understand what was that like, how did she navigate that, were there any type of mental health concerns that were present for her during the surrogacy journey, what was the
Yeah.
experience after the surrogacy journey, because not just because you've done surrogacy once does it mean that you can do surrogacy again. And it
Right.
really just depends on what the experience was. Of course, the emotional, psychological aspect is huge for me, because that's where we're looking at what was that experience like for them, to determine whether if they are still capable to go on a second or third journey.
Mhm.
Um, it's I have had some cases where someone did surrogacy and they're coming back, but there was complications during that first initial journey. There was a lot of mental health concerns that came up for her, depression, anxiety, or she wasn't coping well. The support system was really not present, and so all of these things may not make it like a good scenario for her to move forward with the second journey. Again,
Yeah.
I'm kind of being like just broad here. I mean, there's a lot of other things that we do to screen for things that again can give us information on whether they would be able to move forward with a second or third journey. But overall, these are some of the things that I look for when I'm
Yeah.
meeting with a repeat surrogate.
No, I think that's really good for, I mean, everybody, but also for the surrogates to know is that, your first surrogacy journey may not look like your pregnancy or pregnancies before. And there's a good chance your second surrogacy journey may not look like your first. So some of the presumptions and expectations we bring into it, I often find like surrogates will tell me my first couple, my first IPs were super involved, and my second couple is, hands length and very, very distant. And there's just a lot that kind of goes into each match is going to be different because, like you said, that every party has their own hopes and dreams and what they want post delivery. So that's just good for everybody to know kind of what that looks like.
Yeah.
I guess, Joey, do you have any like final thoughts for either surrogates or for just the industry in general, for IPs, for agencies, clinics, about kind of what your role is, what things could be either beneficial for you, or what you feel like can make these journeys for all these prospective families go smoother or better, or just be a better experience for everyone?
Yeah, I think, if I'm talking to a gestational carrier, candidate, I think one of the things that I would say is, thank you for wanting to, help someone build their family. I'm very grateful just because I've been helped by someone like them.
Right.
But also, I think it's important to make sure that you prioritize your physical and mental well-being. You want to make sure that you have a support within, your family or outside your family to help you, navigate surrogacy. You definitely want to be careful, considering the legal and emotional aspects of this process. You just really want to consider putting yourself first, because it is, again, such an emotional, psychological, and physical demanding process. So that you want to just be careful with yourself. You definitely want to make sure that you care for yourself for sure.
Mhm.
And I think also, just in general with people in the industry, is like we want to definitely, just be very careful with screenings and consultations. We want to give both the intended parents and the gestational carriers, sperm donors, egg donors, we really want to afford them these talks with mental health providers so that they can become educated about the emotional, psychological aspects of this process. Everyone's making a big decision about this family building process. And again, it's emotionally, psychologically demanding, physically demanding. We want to give everybody the opportunity to understand what they're getting themselves into so that they can make informed decisions. We really want to educate people and understanding what their options are so that as they're moving along their journey, it can be a smooth process. We don't want to cut out screenings or joint sessions. We really want to give everybody the opportunity to understand what the expectations are so that everyone can have a safe, smooth journey.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, part of our big thing here is like I think of myself as an educator as much as a lawyer, and I think that what you do is incredibly important for those, again, pieces that are not necessarily covered in the contract, but are so important for that trust building, for that relationship aspect of this that you kind of brought up. That's super important. So thank you for what you do, Joey. For everyone else who watched, thanks for joining us today at the Surrogates Corner. Please like, subscribe, go check out Counseling with Joey and Associates, and be back next time. Thanks so much, Joey.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.